Hello, I'm Hayden Falco77 Stevens, and let me welcome you to Origins, the show where we unravel the mysteries behind the creation of some of the greatest titles in esports, plus we uncover the secrets behind their success. Under the microscope today is Call of Duty, a series which arrived on the scene in 2003 and remains a formidable force in the realm of first-person shooters. It is also the best-selling FPS franchise of all time by a huge margin, with an estimated 280 million sales worldwide. Call of Duty is now a world-class gaming institution, but it wasn't always triumphant on the fierce front line that is first-person shooters. So how did this nuclear bomb of a franchise come to be, and what were its origins? Well, it all started back in 1998 with Valve's Half-Life, a game which would spark a revolution and lead to the creation of Infinity Ward, the birthplace of Call of Duty. Valve's first-person shooter Half-Life changed the face of video games forever, and not just for its slick graphics and realistic gameplay. Half-Life was proof that shooters could be a platform for storytelling. id Software's Wolfenstein 3D, Doom, and Quake had popularised action-driven first-person shooters in the 90s, but Half-Life was a breath of fresh air, especially for gamers craving an experience with a little more depth. Unlike other games of the era, which relied on cutscenes to accompany the gameplay, almost all of Half-Life's story was told through scripted sequences.
My colleagues are waiting at the tip of the Lambda reactor. Waiting for you, I mean.
Black Mesa Research Facility, where the game was set, was not just a map, it was a location with history, a history which the player unravelled as the game progressed. There was, of course, first-person shooter action, but there were also puzzles and a compelling narrative, all beautifully intertwined. Half-Life marked the beginning of a revolution in first-person shooters, and showed that fans of the genre were open to new things. One game, which was already in the works during Half-Life's development, was Medal of Honor for the PlayStation 1, which was developed by DreamWorks Interactive and written by renowned film director and producer Steven Spielberg. The game took place near the end of World War II, with the player taking on the role of an American lieutenant charged with completing a series of espionage missions. The original Medal of Honor struck a chord with gamers, and the sequel, Medal of Honor Underground, was also set during the Second World War, but this time in Nazi-occupied France. Both titles were so far PlayStation only, and the third installment would mark the leap to PC and was produced by a new developer, 2015 Inc. 2015 Inc. were a relatively new company, but after being contacted by Steven Spielberg's team, they were thrown in the deep end and signed on to produce a game with a storyline written by the man himself. The game was called Medal of Honor Allied Assault, and its storyline and levels closely resembled the scenes from Spielberg's blockbuster hit Saving Private Ryan.
Alright men, move fast, spread out, and stay clear of open beach. Port side, you with Pal. Starboard, you with me.
The level of immersion in the game's opening scene was breathtaking. Allied Assault was praised for its depiction of the iconic battle. Although the game turned into a rather run-of-the-mill shooter once the player made it off the beach, the team behind the game had formed a close bond. Following the release of Medal of Honor Allied Assault, 2015 Inc. saw some of its development team leave in search of greener pastures. This included its level designer, Zedrika, development director Vince Zampella, and engineering lead Jason West. The greener pasture was a brand new company, with all 21 original veterans from Allied Assault. The company was called Infinity Ward. Infinity Ward's first project was to be their own spin on the World War II setting, and work began on their first title in April 2002, which they named Call of Duty. Infinity Ward's vision was far greater than that of 2015 Inc.'s, and the brand new company set out to create a grittier, more rugged World War II FPS that better depicted the era. Infinity Ward spared no expense to recreate World War II in a video game, and not only extensively researched vehicles and artillery from the era, but also the weaponry and apparel.
Our weapon sounds are highly detailed.
Call of Duty was also one of the earliest first-person shooter titles to feature iron sights in gameplay, giving players the option to aim down the barrel to increase accuracy. Aim could be further improved by crouching or lying prone, and they could also scale walls and obstacles to get a better firing position. Unlike later titles, the original Call of Duty allowed players to toggle between different firing modes, single shot or full auto.
You will fight the fascist Nazi invaders with all your strength!
As the game was hoping to simulate combat on an actual battlefield, the gameplay was dissimilar to other shooters at the time. The player moved in conjunction with allied soldiers rather than by himself. Call of Duty placed heavy emphasis on strategy by encouraging the use of cover such as walls and barricades, throwing projectiles such as explosive grenades, and by providing suppressive fire for your fellow soldiers.
Same drill, Martin. Clear this bunker and search for documents.
There was no I in Call of Duty, and that was no coincidence. To bring the game to life, the unique selling point of Call of Duty was to be its squad play. Infinity Ward was keen to break away from the one-man army trend set by the likes of Doom, Unreal Tournament and Quake, and instead make Call of Duty about fighting alongside your brothers in arms. In order to reach that goal, the developers worked tirelessly on their own pathfinding AI, which they called Conduit. The computer-controlled soldiers in Call of Duty were designed to move between cover points and flank opponents. They were also dynamic instead of scripted, like other games of the era, ensuring a different experience every time a level was replayed, adding yet another level of authenticity to the World War II title.
Don't stop now! Price and Ingram are behind these doors! Stand back, we're gonna blow them!
Unlike the Medal of Honor series, Call of Duty featured the campaigns of 3 allied nations led by 3 different protagonists, and was filled with historical references. The first campaign focused around Private Martin, a newly enlisted member of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment in the US Army. The opening mission had Martin and his unit seize a nearby town from German forces by setting up a radio beacon and defending the drop zone while under heavy fire. With deadly bombers flying overhead in the night sky, explosions left, right and centre, and the relentless echo of combat, Call of Duty put the player right in the thick of World War II action. The addition of the shell shock feature made it all the more real, with the player experiencing muffled hearing, blurred vision and impaired movement after being close to a blast. Call of Duty came with an American, British and Soviet campaign, and included many iconic battles, ranging from the small unit tactics of the American Army in the Bricourt Manor Assault, to large-scale warfare at the Soviet Battle of Stalingrad. Call of Duty was a game drenched in history, and after 18 months of development, it was finally released in October 2003. On release, Infinity Ward's first ever title, Call of Duty, received critical acclaim and went on to receive numerous accolades, including the inaugural BAFTA Game Award for Best Game. Computer Gaming World magazine named Call of Duty the Shooter of the Year, and commented, "Call of Duty won this category without a shot fired. There was simply no debate." Call of Duty went on to be the 8th best-selling PC game of 2003, despite its Q3 release. Infinity Ward had hit the ground running, and it would be 2 years before they announced that they were working on a sequel. The original Call of Duty had set the bar high, and Infinity Ward had their work cut out for them to even try and match its brilliance. Fortunately, the crucial partnership became the key to further success. American game publisher Activision took a keen interest in Infinity Ward and helped fund the new studio during the development of the original Call of Duty, buying up 30% of the company in the process. Following the successful release, Activision bought the rest of the company and signed all of its employees to long-term contracts. In fact, it was Activision that announced that Infinity Ward would develop Call of Duty 2 in April 2005.
That set like a pretty high bar for Call of Duty 2. What are we going to do differently? How are we going to top that?
Infinity Ward's president at the time, Grant Collier, promised the sequel to Call of Duty would be the most intense and realistic action game imaginable, with advanced technology set to deliver an unprecedented level of authenticity. Financial concerns that had haunted the studio during the creation of the first Call of Duty were no longer an issue. All that was left was to create a sequel that would live up to the hype. Call of Duty 2 once more featured 3 individual campaigns, and just like the original, the playable nations were the Americans, the British, and the Soviets. Each campaign came with 9 missions and 4 difficulty settings.
There's the Panzerwerfer! We need to find a way around this gate!
The game was once again set in World War II. The only character to make a return was the red-moustached British officer, Captain Price. The historic battles featured in their campaigns were almost all new, with the Battle of Stalingrad the only historic engagement to feature in both titles. Unlike in the original, the player could swap between characters instead of playing out the battles chronologically. However, the characters and battlefields were not the only new feature to Call of Duty 2. Machine guns, flak cannons, and even tanks could be commandeered to take out enemy troops. The AI of enemy soldiers was improved, so much so that they could more intelligently hunt down the player, while the incredibly authentic game audio made for a truly immersive experience.
Remember what you have learned. Good luck.
Despite all of Infinity Ward's best efforts, however, Call of Duty 2 was just missing that spark to set it apart from the original, and was more of a polished COD 1 than a groundbreaking new title. Fans were more than satisfied, however, to get more of the same action that they had fallen in love with. The success showed Activision that they were onto a winner with their new franchise. Despite this, the hunger to improve the game was still strong, and their third installment would see a big change. We'll tell you all about it right after the break.